If you call your channel something like Essence of Thought, I think you set a pretty high bar for yourself, don't you? And so you're going to kind of fall flat on your face if you don't quite manage to achieve those standards. So this is a video response to Peter J. Thurston, who did label his channel Essence of Thought, and whose videos I've generally liked, but this latest video I don't really have a lot of time for. It is on this business of no platforming, which is many a term we use in the UK, but it's something that we've seen. It's a phenomena that we've seen the last couple of years, both sides of the Atlantic, and it is this business that takes place at universities where speakers get invited to come and speak to a university and then get disinvited down the line, either for something that they were going to speak about, which is it's a perspective on an issue that's regarded as not acceptable. Right, you can hear the alternative perspective, but by Christ, you're not going to hear their perspective. Or it's not even something they were going to be talking about. Maybe something else that they said in the past on some totally different subject that just makes them persona non grata as far as some body of students is concerned. Maybe it's invading somebody's safe space, so it's going to make some students feel threatened, just the very fact that this perspective is going to be entertained on campus. Right, so those are the grounds. What Peter J. Thurston has decided to do is to defend the principles that lie beyond no platforming in his video, and I really do feel the need to respond to this, not because I've got some particular beef with Peter, because I've followed Peter's channel for some time and I've liked some of his material, but I'm just flabbergasted at some of the arguments that he's come out with here, and some of what I hope to demonstrate are just the most egregious straw men that you could imagine in terms of portraying what a lot of these actions are about and what it is that we're actually talking about when we're talking about no platforming. Okay, so what I'll do is just before I get things underway, this is going to be a format where I show you a bit of Peter's video and then I say something about it, then I show you another bit. We all know the rig by now. But it's quite a complicated sort of video to structure, and it's actually, I spent about 3.5 hours, not last night, the night before, working out how I was going to set this out. And I think I've got a structure that works, but I'm always a bit concerned in these situations that I may end up quote mining, or it's seemingly like a little bit of a quote mine. So really, more than ever, I always say this, but more than ever, I request that you go and watch his video first. Of course, I'll give you a link to his video. So you will benefit more from that, I think, in terms of understanding what I'm talking about with this, and it puts me in safer ground as well with regard to not quote mining. So what I will do is, with that said, I'll then assume, because I know a fair percentage of people won't do that, I'll then carry on as normal, and let me give you a clip of Peter and we'll take it from there.
As a student currently passing through the higher education system, I can often feel like a specimen placed on exhibit at the zoo. There's this sense of entitlement held by the general public around the idea that they get to hold court on matters they have demonstrated time and time again a complete lack of understanding.
I don't know about you, and this isn't central to his arguments. I could have skipped this, but I just found that a horribly elitist start. It sounded like something from another era before, the working man was given the right to vote there. We kind of accept in a democracy that a lot of people that don't know fuck all about any of the relevant issues get a say in things. And it isn't just this elite that knows all about it that gets a say. That's just part of the system that we work under. And I know he says later on in the video, well, it's students who pay the tuition fees, so it's students who should get to decide. But tuition fees only account for about 1/3 of the funding that universities get. And the majority of the funding is made up of education grants and research grants that come out of the public purse. So I think that does give the public a say in these, even if it's a somewhat ignorant say. And if you're going to deny the public a say, or say the public shouldn't comment on things just because of public ignorance, then tell me about any issue in the sphere of politics that the public can comment on, because I don't know any issue that the public, taken as a whole, isn't generally ignorant upon. Okay, well, let's get on with this video.
Take, for example, the recent outcry over no platforming, an ancient practice that is the very reason universities exist in the first place, which has become equated to a violation of human rights.
I know he sounds a bit like a bad joke, and I know you're thinking, Jim, you said about not quote mining him. Surely you're quote mining him here. But I will play you the bit that he says after this in a moment, and he doesn't really clarify or clear this up or put it into any kind of context that makes sense. It just seems to be something that you've got to take at face value. No platforming is an ancient practice, and it is the reason that universities exist in the first place. So the reason that universities exist in the first place is so that they can bar people from speaking at universities. I can actually, having thought round it, think of a simpler way that you could achieve the same goal, and that is just not to have universities exist in the first place. Ergo, there is probably some other reasons why we have universities other than to no platform people and stop them speaking at universities. Just a thought there. But it's probably a very useful moment just to discuss exactly what we mean by no platforming here. And to put this into some kind of context of the kind of examples we're talking about. So fundamental to this in the UK is the NUS, the National Union of Students. You may remember them from a year or so ago in their women's conference where they banned people from clapping because it could trigger people. You had to show jazz hands instead. Remember the kind of derision that they got, the universal derision that they got. That kind of shows you how representative the National Union of Students is of students generally. Not very. They'll take everybody's money, they'll take everybody's subscriptions, but they really only represent a very small thread of student thought there. That's something that's worth bearing in mind throughout this video. Something else that's worth bearing in mind is that each university has a students' union which usually affiliates to the NUS, and then individual societies, student societies, then affiliate to that students' union, and so that's kind of the way the order works. Now, the NUS policy states that it asserts that no prescribed person or organisation should be given a platform to speak, nor should a union officer share a platform with them. It then goes on to list, this is on Wikipedia, the organisations that are prescribed with regard to the NUS, and they're either sort of British nationalist organisations or Islamic organisations. Then it talks about individuals and why they are prescribed, such as Julie Bindel because she's transphobic, or George Galloway. Remember George Galloway? He's the one that was, if you remember, from the United States, spoke at that US Senate committee about Iraq and weapons of mass destruction, which was a highly entertaining speech that he gave there. He's been no platform because apparently he's a rape apologist there. I don't really know about the background to that, but that's the kind of thing that they do. Now, individual student unions don't necessarily no platform on exactly the same criteria, but this is how most no platforming works in the UK certainly, is that if you have an organisation, let's say a Muslim society or a secular society at the university, and you want to have a debate or you want to have a speaker in, then you will invite that speaker, but you have to fill in all the forms and send them off to the students' union and say, we're going to have this debate in this hall, and these are the speakers that we've invited. And then that's the point where the students' union can say, whoa, no, we don't particularly like that speaker because of this particular viewpoint they have, or because they may say this thing, and that might make some other group of students feel unsafe, right? So that's what it's all about. That's where the no platforming kicks in, when that students' union, or when the nationally the NUS kicks in and says, no, you cannot have that person speaking on campus, not under the auspices of the students' union.
I speak, of course, about the garbage claim that this is the desecration of freedom of speech and expression on campuses in both the UK and the US.
So the reason I'm playing this in part is because I agree with what Peter has to say. He is correct. Technically speaking, freedom of speech issues are governmental issues. If the government is denying you the ability to express your opinions on these matters, then that is a freedom of speech issue. But if it doesn't relate to the government, then it isn't a freedom of speech issue, technically speaking. But that doesn't mean that it isn't an issue. So one of the examples that Peter gives with regard to this is regard to Julie Bindel later on in the video, who is a transphobe. She has transphobic views, and she has been no platformed on a couple of occasions within the United Kingdom. But here's the thing, Peter doesn't really have a problem with that, but imagine if the situation was reversed, and imagine if it was a trans activist who was being no platformed, and if university students' unions were saying, I'm sorry, we're not buying this shit, we don't approve of your views, your perspectives on gender, and so we're going to stop you from speaking at our universities. I fail to believe that Peter would not have an issue with this, and I don't think he'd be getting quite so caught up in the technicalities of the language and saying, well, yes, technically this isn't a freedom of speech issue. I personally don't think he'd give a fuck about that. He'd be too concerned about the fact that somebody who was a trans activist wasn't allowed to talk at universities. And crack on with that, Peter. I'd be right on board with you. I'd be four square having your back on that particular issue there. So no problem there, right? What he then goes on to do within this video is to give, he then gives this analogy, and everybody who watches my videos will know that I'm a lover of analogies, but really this is, it seemed a kind of tedious and unnecessary analogy that didn't really add anything. And it went on for several minutes, and I'm going to try and avoid that because I don't think there's anything he covers in the analogy that he doesn't cover later on. And if I try and give you the analogy, I've got to let you listen to a lot of the analogy, then I've got to pass the analogy across into the actual real life scenario and show you which bits port across to which bits, and then after I've done that and you're holding that in your head, then I have to make the points that I make, which is a devilishly difficult way of going about it. So I'm going to sweep past all of that and go 3 minutes and 46 seconds into the video and take it from there.
A university moderates the academic vigour of its educational content to ensure high standards. The better the moderation, the better the standards, the better the university. A failure to moderate is a failure to ensure decent education. This is the very thing that separates a university from an open mic night at your local pub.
This is misleading on your part, Peter, almost to the point of being deceptive. Indeed, it is true that a university is different to an open mic night at a pub, but this is just a straw man that you're erecting here, and this is one of the central straw men of your video that you just keep building up and then knocking down and building up and knocking back down. But it's totally an utter guff that you're coming out with here, Peter, to suggest that the reason that people are being no-platformed is based on academic standards. Let's remember first off that the majority of, although academic standards are very, very important to universities, that is in terms of course content, it's not in terms of the extracurricular activity that student societies put on as an evening. And most of the time that's what we're talking about. We're talking about societies inviting speakers or debaters to come along and then the Students' Union kiboshing it and saying, I'm sorry, you can't have that person because it makes some of the students feel unsafe, or because they say things that we regard as unpalatable. Also, they've said things in the past that we just cannot tolerate somebody who's going to come and speak on our university site having ever said. That's what we're talking about. It's nothing to do with academic standards. Do you honestly expect me to believe that George Galloway is blocked on the grounds that he doesn't make the academic standards, and yet Russell Brand, Peter, Russell fucking Brand gets to speak at the Cambridge Union? Oh, so he does make the academic standards, does he? That's absolute bullshit. I don't buy that for a minute.
So what we are in fact discussing with no platforms is a moral obligation in providing the agreed service paid for by the students. Oh yeah, that's a part that's almost always left out. The spaces and resources these external speakers demand, they're paid for by the students. That's why said students have more than a mere right to air their protest.
So this brings us to the second and third members of this unholy trinity of immortal strawman, Peter, that you've erected for the purposes of this video, so that you can just keep building them up and knocking them back down again. So yes, these resources might be paid for by the students, Peter, but it's not just the jazz hand waving NUS cunts that criticised, that condemned gay men for culturally appropriating black women. It's not just students that think the way that you do, Peter, that object to the speakers that you object to, Peter. It's all the students, including the students that want to hear these speakers. And this is the other thing. This is the third of the straw man, this idea that these speakers are demanding these facilities. They're not at all. These speakers were invited by student groups. They were invited to the university by other students. You know, I know you're the kind of person who you rails elsewhere in this video about people like Jermaine Greer because you're saying they're denying your existence. Well, don't you deny people's existence, Peter. Don't become the kind of person that you hate, because that is what you are doing here, right? By denying the fact that there are students on your campus who are contributing to these facilities in exactly the same way that you are, right, who do want to hear these speakers and who form societies that are inviting these speakers because they want to hear them speak. So stop denying their existence and making out as if you or the NUS or the Students' Union are speaking with some kind of unified voice for all the speakers on campus, because nothing could be further from the truth.
They're right to say, I'd like to know, and I'd like to be able to inform what the money is going on to ensure the quality of my education.
Oh, come on, Peter. What is relevant to the standard of your education is the standard of the content of your course, not the standard of the extracurricular activity. Your education isn't suffering because in the Union Bar the pub quiz isn't sufficiently highbrow enough. The vast majority of people that are being no-platformed are being invited by student societies who are affiliated to the Students' Union, and they're inviting people to speak or to take part in debates as part of extracurricular activity. This has nothing to do with the content of your course, right? What has to do with the content of your course are the speakers and lecturers that take part as the content of your course, and the vast majority of people that are no-platformed are not speaking as part of course material. So this is just an entire misdirection on your part.
Almost everyone agrees that there are talks no longer worth having on campuses, such as whether the Earth is 6,000 years old, does the sun rotate around the Earth, or whether slavery is socially justifiable. Most people agree on these things and would never demand universities use their resources to promote these topics.
First off, who is demanding that universities promote these topics? And secondly, Peter, if these things are an issue such as they say you are, such as you say they are, and they must be because it's all based on academic standards, then how come they're not on that fucking list, Peter? How come it was just organisations like the BNP and Islamic organisations that were on there? How come the Answers in Genesis isn't on there? How come the Discovery Institute isn't on there? How come Ken Ham and Kent Hovind and Michael Behe and people like that aren't on that list? I'll tell you why. Because you are full of shit on this point. I'm sorry, sir. I like you as an individual. I like a lot of your material, but this is absolute hogwash. This has nothing to do with academic standards. And if the Christian society, if the Muslim society, let's say the Muslim society at your university wanted to have an imam come and speak, right? The Students' Union, when they got their little chit of paper, they wouldn't say, oh, well, we better check out whether this imam's a creationist, because if he is, he won't make the academic standards. Fuck off, would they say that? What they might do is say, well, let's see if he said something transphobic. Let's see if he said something that's homophobic. And if that's the case, then we'll block him. And you know just as well as I do that is exactly what would go on there. So stop. You know, you can see by the responses that you got to your video, Peter, that you're not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes here. And it kind of staggers me that you thought that you might do.
So I am part of the camp that believes questioning the existence of LGBT plus individuals is a conversation that sort of needs to die off, at least until there's greater evidence to justify further discussion than simple denial, which I believe is as likely to occur as evidence that the universe is 6,000 years old.
So let me see if I've got this straight, Peter, right? Because you keep referring with reference to creationism, to young earth creationism as your example to try and furnish us as how we should feel about it. What I'm getting from you is this vibe that until Young Earth creationists can provide some solid evidence to give us grounds to consider that the Earth is 6,000 years old, that Christian and Muslim societies ought not be allowed to have preachers and imams who are young Earth creationists because they haven't made the academic standard. And if a secular society or an atheist society wanted to set up a debate perhaps between an evolutionary biologist and a creationist, that the Students' Union should no platform the creationist and not allow that debate to take place. Is that what you are claiming?
But is that to say no platforming cannot be abused to stifle freedom of speech? Not at all. No platforming is a tool, and like all tools, it can be abused.
I don't entirely disagree with your central point. It doesn't mean that the tool's faulty just because some implementations of it are faulty. But there are two problems I have here, which is that the vast majority of the implementations, there's none of them that I buy. That seem necessary to me. Right, so I don't see all these beneficial implementations of no platforming that justify the egregious implementations. All I'm seeing is the egregious implementations. And after all, if what you're saying is that the NUS or you are sufficiently enabled and disinterested to judge the wheat from the chaff, to judge the conversations that need to be had and the conversations that don't need to be had, what gives you the right to judge that? What gives the NUS the right? Is it because the NUS have been elected? They're elected representatives? Well, the Conservative government are elected representatives, Peter. So would you be prepared to allow on that basis David Cameron to decide what political discussions can no longer take place in the United Kingdom, because as far as he's concerned, it's already beyond doubt, right, that economic perspective is faulty, right, or that socio-political position makes absolutely no sense. I know that you wouldn't. That would scare the shit out of you, just as it would scare the shit out of me, right? But there's absolutely no difference on campus. The NUS has a very focused political perspective, and they are the very last kind of people that should be deciding on behalf of all students what is acceptable and what isn't in terms of the political positions that can be espoused on a campus, any more than putting fucking UKIP in charge of it would be a reasonable thing to do. So yeah, you can make that argument, and I'd buy that argument if when I looked at the implementations I thought, well, yeah, most of the time it makes sense. I don't really see any position. You talk about some positions where, well, it's beyond doubt, right? Well, if it's totally beyond doubt, what is your issue? If it's totally beyond doubt, why do you mind having the discussion? There are some certain formats where I would see as a problem, and that might be an issue where student unions should get involved, and that is something that I will mention right at the end of this video.
To place Greer and Namazi in the same circle would be an insult to the mountain Namazi has had to climb. Whilst Greer is a well-off upper-class white woman who can harness national and even international media coverage to insult students for breaching her human rights on freedom of speech when she feels smarted, Maryam Namazi faces the threat of radical violence for every single word she says.
Oh, you know, this sounds suspiciously like punching up rhetoric that you're giving us here, Peter. And I mean, this is something that I'm opposed to anyway. I'm a firm believer that if you're going to punch, you should punch on merit and not punch somebody just because they happen to be bigger than you are, Peter. But it seems to go against exactly what you were saying earlier on. Earlier on you were saying, well, no, people are no platformed on the grounds of lack of academic merit. That is what we're going on. That is our criteria. But now you're saying, okay, it's fine to no platform Germaine Greer because she's a wealthy white woman, white middle class woman with lots of resources, whereas Maryam Namazi isn't any of these things. And so for some reason the same standards don't apply to her. Now I know you talk about it elsewhere in your discussion of Maryam Namazi. You give some other factors that are involved, and that's fine, those other factors, but this isn't those other factors. Here you're saying it's fine to hit Greer simply because she's wealthy and has access to other resources. That does not affect her argument. That is a form of ad hominem that you're making now. You're making the no platforming about her characteristics as an individual and not about the arguments that she is espousing.
Greer has power that both Namazi and the trans segment of the LGBT plus community do not.
So I wanted to show that bit just because I wanted to segue the other bit that I was talking about then with specifically talking about Greer, because the Greer example is atypical, and I have, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, I have Captain Andy to thank for this. Thank you, Captain Andy. Because he steered me along with this, because I don't really checked out the specific Greer example, to be honest, because I kind of got a little bit jaded with all of these no platforming things. But she was actually talking as part of the course content. And the form of no platforming that took place was more in terms of trying to intimidate her to keep away from campus rather than blocking her from speaking. Because it was part of course content, of course, the Students' Union couldn't block her as they could if she'd been talking for a student society. Now, the problem that they had with Greer wasn't academic standard. In fact, Germaine Greer is a feminist academic of decades standing. It was her views, her transphobic views. That was the problem that they had with Germaine Greer and why they were trying to get her blocked from talking or to make it impossible for her to talk. Now, according to Greer, Greer says that she'd never... The talk that she was giving, the lecture that she was giving had nothing to do with her trans views whatsoever. It was on a different subject. And she weathered the harassment and she gave her talk, and duly her talk had nothing to do with trans issues. The only time trans issues cropped up is because there were people that had turned up in the audience, and when it got to the Q&A at the end, rather than asking about things that related to her lecture, as they ought to have done, they brought up issues about her trans views, right? So that's the only relationship that it had. So I have to ask you, Peter, if this is what you mean by academic standards, then let's say that I'm running the communications department and I get a guest lecturer in to speak on communications, right? Maybe an electric engineer who's going to talk about an aspect of communications there, right? And it turns out that the lecturer is a young earth creationist, right? He's not going to be talking about young earth creationism, but he's still a young earth creationist, and we know that now, right? And he's one of the top experts on his communications field, but he's a young earth creationist. Should we try and harass him away from speaking on the grounds that he doesn't make the academic standards that we need for this course, and that our education is going to suffer on the grounds that he's a young earth creationist? That's what I put it to you, because that's putting it in within the scope of what you're claiming within this video.
I have a microphone, I have a channel, I have a platform, and I do not have to let the Germaine Greers, the Ray Comforts and the Vanny Harrys of the world use it or stand trial in court for a breach of human rights, i.e. freedom of speech.
Oh, fuck off with this shit, Peter. This is just absolute straw-manning bullshit, right? It's your channel, absolutely, and you can run it how you like, and you can have whoever you want on it, just the same as you can talk normally, or you can talk saying each word like it is a new sentence. That is your right to do what you will with your channel, but this is not what we're talking about, is it? You, like I said before, you make it sound like these speakers are just turning up at the universities and rattling the gates and saying, "Oh, you wankers, give me a fucking microphone, book me out a lecture theatre. I demand the right to speak," as they swig down their can of very strong beer. Right, but this isn't what's happening. These are people, often very well-known people, who have been invited to speak. Peter, invited to speak often by other student groups who are students just the same as your students. It's not like they're lesser students or they're students that don't count or they're some kind of lower caste of students, right, that you can just lord over. They are student groups who represent students who want to hear these people and have invited these people to speak. So how come you talk as if like these are your fucking personal resources? The university's resources are your fucking resources, and I don't want anybody to have these resources unless they happen to agree with what I say. Well, it just doesn't work like that, Peter. And just the same as I would have your back, absolutely, right? If you or anybody who agreed with your position was being no platform because some other group of students said, we don't want to hear this, right? We don't like what they have to say, right? If they were a load of bigots and they didn't want to listen to what you have to say, I would absolutely have your back. But I'm not going to allow you to do the same thing, and I'm not going to allow you to massively misportray this as if this is speakers just demanding out of the blue the right to speak at universities. That is absolute outrageous bullshit.
Are you a traitor? It's the exact same speak as the Cold War and post 9/11 narrative. You're either with us or against us. But as you now hopefully know, me not giving you my resources is not denying you your ability to speak or silencing you.
It's just the same straw man again, Peter, isn't it? So I'm not going to labour it. It's not your resources. It's not some particular political faction of the students' resources. It's every student's resources. And these speakers have been invited to speak, Peter, which suggests that at least some students do want to listen to what they have to say.
Want to change things? Prove your point. Keep piling up the evidence until it becomes undeniable, and then we can have this talk. Not when it is simply your opinion that LGBT plus individuals do not exist, or that the Earth is 6,000 years old, or that the sun rotates around us.
This is what I mean, folks, when I say he just keeps resurrecting these straw men so he can knock them back down again. Geocentrists are not on the NUS no platform list. They're not on any student union's no platform list. I believe that Peter runs an atheist society or a secular society or something like that at his university, or at least did at one point. And if he'd wanted to invite a geocentrist to have a debate with a physicist or whatever, right, about geocentrism, the Students' Union wouldn't be no platforming. They'd say, yeah, fine, that'll be a bit of fun. You crack on with it. They wouldn't say there's not enough academic rigour in this. We cannot allow this to take part. You know, he's portraying it again as if it's about academic rigour, but the truth is that is not why people are being no platform. They're being no platform because the views that they espouse are regarded as being racist or bigoted in some way, and in making some students not feel safe, or just creating too much of a ruckus and commotion on campus. That's why they're being no platformed. But it's interesting that he brings up the subject of creationism and geocentrism, because it makes me think of this whole business of treating university students as if they're children. He talks about creationism, and of course, as they'll teach the controversy thing about keeping creationism out of schools. We're not really keeping it out of schools, of course, because in RE classrooms we can teach it, but in terms of keeping it out of the science classroom.
It's this very narrative that has allowed creationism to sneak back into the classroom under the guise of teaching the alternative.
But here's the thing, we're talking on one hand about schools and children, and on the other hand we're talking about universities and adults. And the reason that we're keeping it out of schools and children is because we don't regard children as sophisticated to be able to evaluate these different things, and we don't regard the school as having sufficient time to give the evidence that needs to be shown to allow the students, to allow the children to make that evaluation. But universities aren't involving children, it's involving adults. And I'm afraid, look, adults are flawed and they arrive at conclusions which are faulty. Of course they do, but adults are as good as it ever gets, folks. It's not as if we become super adults. If we can say, well, let's just protect the adults, let's shield the adults from these things, and then they can discover them and decide what's right and wrong when they become super adults, because there is no super adulthood. Adulthood is as good as it gets, and in fact your university years are perhaps the time when you are most receptive to new ideas and most capable. This is why a lot of scientists, their best work is done in their 20s and their early 30s, and then they kind of get a little bit set in their ways. So it's kind of tragic to stop people hearing these dissenting opinions, right? So why would you want to do that? If a geocentrist really wants, if somebody wants to invite the geocentrist to talk and debate at university, why the hell on the face of this earth would you try and stop that from happening? These are adults we're talking about, not children. Let's stop treating university students like they're children.
Let's give one last analogy, just to hit home.
Okay, well, this better be good.
If you view no platforming, the withdrawal or non-allowance of my resources to spread your opinion, as a violation of freedom of speech, you have destroyed the scientific community.
It wasn't. Okay, now I can't just leave it at that. I'd like to. It'd be funnier, wouldn't it? But I'd kind of be doing him a bit of a disfavour to do that. It wouldn't really be fair. What he goes on to suggest is that science breaks down because the peer review process would break down. Why? Because if the journal Nature just had to publish anything, right? If I send some shite in, they've got to publish it, otherwise they're sort of censoring me or platforming me and affecting my freedom of speech. That is his argument, folks. And it's like he's trying to bundle all his straw men up together here. For a start, nobody is suggesting that anybody who contacts a university should be given the chance to speak. As I've said it, I think I probably said this before, these are people who have been invited to speak, right? So that is a slightly different thing. And the other thing is, if the journal Nature rejected my paper, I would expect them to do that on academic merit, and I think that is what Peter would do. Let me throw it back to Peter, right? If the journal Nature started rejecting people's work, and scientific journals generally rejected people's work, not on academic merit, but on the grounds of what attitudes they had towards trans people, or whether the scientists were racist, or whether the scientists were bigoted against homosexuals, right? Then science would break down. No, they're expected to judge work on its academic merit. That's what they're expected to judge on. So if you want no platforming to work, put your fucking money where your mouth is. Stop judging people on whether they're racist or fascist or sexist or transphobic or any of these other criteria that is actually judged on, which the NUS admits it's judged on, which the student unions admits it's judged on, and let's start judging it on the criteria that you bullshit claim that it's judged on, which is this academic merit.
Not any random person can demand to have 24/7 airtime on the BBC. Is that a freedom of speech violation?
So here's the deal, Peter. You've obviously got it in your head that there are these individuals out here. They're not being invited to speak to university. It's not as if student societies are asking them, can you come and speak on this date? We'd love you to take part in this debate, or to give us a speech or a lecture on this. No, that's not what's happening. They are contacting universities out the blue and demanding a lecture theatre, and demanding a microphone and all the equipment be set up, and demanding that people turn up and listen to what they have to say. So give me a list of this, right? Because I'm willing to walk back everything that I've said in this video if you can furnish a list of people doing this, because it's the first that I have ever heard about any of this. This has really it's really struck me like a bolt from the blue if what you were saying is true here. As far as I knew, people are being invited by universities and by student societies to go and speak. So give me your list and then we can take it from there. With regard to this and the function of student unions and the NUS, I think there are some subjects that are very touchy, and I know not everybody will agree with me. Some people take a very hardline libertarian stance and say, no, fuck it, if you've got a society, if you want an ultra radical hardline racist to come in and give his perspective, then they ought to be just allowed to talk about it. I don't go as far as that. I think there are certain subjects, and it's for the student union to decide as a representative of the students what those subjects are, which are very contentious, perhaps more contentious among students than other people, right? And which do cause a lot of consternation amongst people. And with those particular subjects, then there might be a case where a debate format is appropriate. and where they may say, well, if you want Julie Bindel to come and talk about trans issues, that's fine, you can do that, but the LGBT Society will be offered the chance to put up somebody who will talk in opposition, and you will have imposed upon you a debate format. It's not as if Julie Bindel can just come and give an hour-long monologue about what she thinks about trans people. No, no, no. The LGBT Society can put somebody up in opposition and have a right to reply, have a chance to reply, and potentially to correct Julie Bindel on whatever she says. Now, I don't have a problem with that, and I think that that's actually a good format, whatever you're talking about. But where it's contentious issues, and we all know what those issues are, then I think that that's perhaps a way forward, and something that I would think is a reasonable way for a student union to act. I'm interested in what you have to think, both about Peter's video, about how I've portrayed it as well, of course, and also about my little suggestion at the end. If you've got all the way to the end, thank you for watching. I've no idea how long it is, but thank you for watching. Bye for now.